Hi, everyone. This is David Finney, partner and co-founder of Leap Orbit. I'd like to thank everybody for all of the engagement we've had over the last couple of weeks since we first announced the private beta launch for our convergent provider directory APIs. Today, I want to show you a quick demo to make it clear how easy it is to interact with our endpoints. And then I was going to touch on a few of the sort of big questions that have rolled in from folks over the last couple of weeks. I'm going to show you interactions with a couple of different APIs. The first API here, I'm going to do a search by specialty and filter it by zip code. So you can see here, I'm in Postman. The input parameters are a taxonomy description of cardiology and a zip code of 10001, which is in Midtown Manhattan. So what I'm basically doing is I'm looking for all the cardiologists that have a practice location in that zip code. And you can see this response is going to be really quick. And what I get back is a list of lots and lots of cardiologists, phone numbers, mailing addresses, DEA numbers, MPIs, all right there. The next endpoint I'm going to show you is what we call our search single best. And what this API is doing is it's going to look for the best possible individual provider match given a set of inputs. So in this case, the inputs are a concatenated first name and last name, Samit Desai, and the city of Baltimore. Samit's a friend of Leap Orbit's. He's an emergency room physician who's here in the local area. And as I send that request, you can see I get a response with a license, a prescribing permit number, license expiration date. We can see he's a physician. He's an emergency physician. We can see his address here. This happens to be the address of St. Agnes Hospital, where he practices primarily. And then we've got a DEA number. This is an individual MPI number, was issued in 2007. Phone numbers. Again, St. Agnes Healthcare, as I said, he's board certified. There are no disciplinary actions. Email address, very, very detailed. These are both easy to use. They're super fast. Obviously, which endpoint you would choose is dependent on your use case. There were, a handful of topics that got quite a bit of interest. One of the first questions was around how do you manage incomplete data? I mean, clearly data fragmentation is a problem. It's a problem that almost every healthcare organization that deals with provider data chases. Not just the incompletion, but sort of the half-life of data, right? How do you know that a practice address is still active? How do you know which states a provider is licensed in? How do you know if they've moved? These are all really good questions. I think this speaks to the fact that there's good data out there, but kind of understanding the texture of the data and which data sources are good for which things is really critical to assembling a golden record or that single best as we think about it. So for instance, if you're looking for addresses, we know that MPES is not a great source for addresses. Typically, they only get updated once when the NPI number is provisioned. So you're not going to mail something to a provider based on an address that you find in MPES. On the other hand, administrative data sets may be really good for addresses, right? This is the way that doctors get their claims paid. So they're motivated to keep it up to date. So, that's part of the sort of art of what we're doing is making some of those assessments about the data sources and which can be relied on for which purposes. Another kind of cluster of questions that we got were around the two different types of MPIs, right? So individual practitioner MPIs and org level MPIs. This is a great question. Obviously, the two things are related, but when you think about it, what we're really talking about is many-to-many relationships, right? We've got networks of providers who are doing business with certain healthcare organizations. They may be in various payer networks. And how do you manage all of that? So the way that we think about that is we have one sort of instance of Convergent that's focused on individual practitioners. Then we have another that's focused on organizations, and everybody has their own MPI number regardless, right? And then we have a layer in between that maps all of those complex and often changing relationships between the two. And if you kind of think about FHIR and you think about the interoperability rule, FHIR and the Da Vinci implementation guide have been really thoughtful about sort of creating a schema that can accommodate all of that complexity. And I think it's very deliberate that CMS in implementing the interoperability rule is really just focused on a tiny piece of it, which is practitioners and practitioner roles. But I think one of the pitfalls of organizations who are thinking short term that are implementing solutions for the interoperability rule is that they put in a solution that really only accommodates that tiny little piece and doesn't start to think about all of the complexity. Not only will organizations find that their interoperability rule solution and their FHIR APIs are not super versatile and possibly not super valuable, but they're also going to find that CMS is going to up the ante. And we think this is sort of the beginning of a process where CMS expects that plans are able to publicly reflect the complexity of their networks and their provider relationships in their open APIs. So I encourage all plans and all Medicaid agencies to carefully think about that as they're designing their solutions. Again, we are right on the cusp of making our private beta fully available to anyone who wants to try it. There's a limited number of slots. And so we would love to have you give it a try. You can try out the endpoints.